Hendricks Commercial Properties is known for its unique redevelopment of cool historic places. The Ironworks Campus in its hometown of Beloit, Wisconsin. The Bottleworks District in Indianapolis, Indiana. The BoDo District in Boise, Idaho, and many more. So today we're going to be talking with Rob Gerbitz. He is CEO of Hendricks Commercial Properties. And I want to find out how this company creates so many unique and frankly magical destinations. You're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. Welcome to the show, Rob. Just to start off, maybe just introduce, how would you introduce yourself, at a cocktail party?
I'm Rob. I guess, I'm Rob Gerbitz. I'm president and CEO of Hendricks Commercial Properties and Geronimo Hospitality Group. You know, we're in commercial real estate, mostly mixed use like the Bottleworks stuff, but we're in hotels, restaurants, and a few things that we're just in, which I'm not entirely sure why we're in sometimes, but we are.
I just have to say that the Hendrix does some of the most interesting, cool stuff, and I
Thank
want to
you.
try to talk about it as much as we can. I want to start though. Let's back up in time. So, how did Hendrix Commercial get started?
Well, Hendricks Commercial was really started by Diane Hendricks in 1974. And it was actually then I don't even, God, if I got it right, I don't remember. It wasn't even called Hendricks Commercial. It was just called like Hendricks Real Estate. At that time, it was she bought two duplexes for $9,000 in Beloit, Wisconsin. And she told the story before. She said, "I didn't have $9,000," and she said I had to scrap by to get just the down payment, but they found a bank that actually would give them a loan for that. And it sounds so crazy nowadays, but that's how she really got started. And then you know, she did, and her son Brent and their sister Carol, they did the sweat equity, they painted and redid that. And then Ken Hendricks, he was a commercial roofer. So he did a lot of military bases, lots of big industrial type stuff. So then he, of course, did the roof, the windows, siding, and all those other things. And she just started from there. I mean, she built the business, the management of the business, and the investments, the redos. She did all of that, and she grew it. She really did. Through the '70s and that, she grew it to over 200 units. Actually, when the banking crisis happened in the '70s, or in the later part of the '70s, uh, she was actually and her team and were asked to go manage apartments in Milwaukee for banks that got them back. So she really built a nice business, as a whole. She wasn't, and she said, we weren't. It wasn't like money was just laying all over her, and it's like, well, let's just go do this. She really worked this business, and so did Ken as well. But and then in 1980, Ken was extraordinarily frustrated with how he was being treated as a roofer, and he said, "I want to change this. I want to do this different." And Diane is a wicked smart business lady. She's just really good at it, and she likes to plan. And so they sat down and they wrote a business plan, and ultimately that business plan became ABC Supply, which they pretty much launched, 81, 82, right in there with their first branch. And they kind of started that process, which took Hendricks Commercial. A lot of that real estate had to be sold to be able to fund, some of the growth of ABC. And they really did a hell of a job growing ABC through the '80s into the '90s. And Hendricks Commercial was always there. In many cases, it was an owner of the ABC Supply branches. Um, and then, that's kind of how they built it. And now, ABC's a $25 billion a year company. It's really just a tremendous grassroots story, and Ken didn't come from money either. He dropped out of high school in 10th grade, and he was a roofer, son of a roofer, grandson of a roofer, and I think great grandson of a roofer as well. So I mean, it was just that was in their blood. And as time goes on and ABC got bigger and bigger, uh, eventually, they had David Luck, who was the president of the company, and really with Diane and Ken, they really just took it to another level and just did amazing things. Uh, but then Ken and Diane really wanted to get back a little bit to the roots of Hendricks and real estate as a whole. And so then they started focusing a little bit in real estate. The ABC was kind of a juggernaut. It was kind of, David and his team were doing their thing. And then about 2000, 2001, that's when Hendricks Commercial started to come back out of the woodwork a little bit and grow almost entirely in industrial properties, so that kind of was their focus back then. Um, and in 2007, unfortunately, Ken had a bad fall and he passed away. He did not fall off a roof. Just everyone says he fell off a roof because he was a roofer, but he did not. He just fell in a very terrible way. It was devastating, obviously, for Diane, for all the kids, but it was devastating for this, not only the Beloit community, but the entire region. Uh, Diane was the business person. She was the legal, the HR, all the operation. That's her forte. She really understood that. She also has a tremendous vision. But Ken was kind of the visionary, the out front guy. I never met him, but everything I ever read, or Diane, or any of the kids told me, he was the guy everyone wanted to hang around because he was gregarious, he was fun, he was just a really good hearted person. So it was just a major, major loss. And I think the bigger misnomer always came, and I learned it very, very quickly when I started here. I started in January 2009 with Diane, and it maybe a month, and the Rockford paper wanted to do an interview about me coming. They wanted to interview Diane, and we did that, and the reporter made reference that Diane was at home cooking dinner for the kids, and Ken would come home and she'd serve dinner. And I learned very quickly how Diane reacts to that kind of thought process, because that is not her. Uh, they spend time as family. They're just an integrated family that really believe in spending time with each other to this day. I mean, they're just very, very close people. But she was not at home cooking and cleaning for Ken and the kids. She was directly involved in all of the aspects of growing these businesses, and for me, that was a great learning really quickly. I didn't really assume any of that myself, but it was interesting how her tone changed when he made reference on that. It was, I mean, she's about the nicest person I know, but I don't think she was as nice at that point because she wasn't pleased with that kind of comment. But uh, so then she hired me, and I started in January of '09, and she told me a lot of things. The night she hired me, I've told this story a million times, it feels like. um, we were sitting at a restaurant with two of her guys, and we were going through just the business and all that stuff, and they hired me, and then she said, okay, it's your baby now. And she said, pardon my language here, but she said, I have a lot of shit I'm not real proud of in real estate. And I said, well, I don't really know what that is yet, but give me some time, and we'll get that turned around where you can have some stuff you're going to be really, really proud of. And she said, all right. And she started to walk away, and then she came back and she said to me, uh, number one is build Beloit. That is your number one responsibility. And I said, okay, I got that. And then she gave me a hug, uh, which I don't know how many interviews you've done, but I've never gotten a hug from anybody. Yeah. So I think that really told me a lot about her as a person. Yeah, for someone she didn't. I mean, we met each other a few times prior, but we didn't really know each other at that point. But which made me feel pretty good, about coming here to work for her, and certainly the family and just this team, and that's kind of where we started the process of taking a lot of our industrial, which was mostly Class C, to be honest with you. It wasn't, there wasn't any Class A industrial at all. Uh, and started that process of, selling them, taking the capital, and then reinvesting in the stuff that we really wanted to build up here in Beloit. And then eventually we sold enough where we were able to really start going, Indianapolis and other parts of the country in a little bit more meaningful way.
So,
So that's kind of how we got there.
so Beloit, Wisconsin, which I'm sorry to say I've never visited,
Yep,
is an integral part of Hendricks' identity. Like that is clear from
100%.
the moment I started reading about you. Tell me a little bit
Mhm.
more about Beloit.
Well, you're absolutely correct. It is the baseline of who we are, and how we think. And Beloit, Wisconsin is, it's a Rust Belt manufacturing city, and it was a dominant manufacturing city. For being, it's about 38,000 people, which has been relatively, it's a little smaller back in the day, of course, but it was relatively same population today that it's been for decades. Um, Now we're starting to grow, which is kind of nice, but it is, historically speaking, it is significant. Like where my office is, where I am sitting, this was the Beloit Corp, and the Beloit Corp manufactured paper machines. So when newspapers would get printed, by and large, the Beloit Corp was the one who made the machine that printed the newspaper. And I heard an interesting story. They said that when D-Day hit, the people that read the newspaper, 90% of those papers were printed on Beloit Corp machines, which
Wow.
I never verified that percentage, by the way, but I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful. And a part of that was and is that, the Beloit Corp employed 5,000 people here, so you can imagine, of the 30 plus thousand that were here back in those days, 5,000 of them worked in this company. And that didn't include all the ancillary companies from the tool and die shops and all that surrounded this plant. I mean, roughly, you would have said probably 25% of the employees, or the population base, worked at the Beloit Corp. The other, population base, a big employer, was Fairbanks Morse. Yeah, and that is, not quite as old as the Beloit Corp, but it's old, and still here to this day, making, now they're just an innovation company into engines, and just a tremendous company. Um, but this was a blue collar manufacturing community. And then the Beloit Corp, which actually started off as Beloit Ironworks, just so you know, and eventually became, excuse me, it started off first as Maryland Houston's Ironworks, and then it became Beloit Ironworks, and then eventually became the Beloit Corp. And virtually run by the same family and or descendants of the same family from its inception for the most part. And, like a lot of things, that's a long time. Most companies don't last like that. And through like the late 80s, roughly the early 90s, the same family was a part of it, but they eventually kind of timed out, if you will. And we're like, okay, we're done. So they sold the company to a German company, and it wasn't a good sale. Uh, it was a conglomerate that had problems in many different places. And basically, they just took all the profitability out of the Beloit Corp, which was a wildly profitable company, and they just diminished it down to virtually nothing until 1999. They told 1,250 employees that you no longer have a job, and basically on a Friday night, Friday afternoon or whatever, they shut the lights off, and that was the end. And it sat like that for years until Diane stepped in and said, "We're buying this." And I saw pictures of what used to be my old office, where they had literally the metal desk with a computer on it and still a little bit of coffee in the styrofoam cup. Dead serious. It was so, I was like, wow,
They
that's
just walked
something
away.
else. They just literally walked away. Um,
So this is the Ironworks campus, is that right? Was
yes,
that the
yes,
first kind
yep.
of big landmark thing y'all did?
Yeah, it really was, because when she said build Beloit, and after I kind of got my bearings a little bit and understanding Beloit better, I never been here in my life until November of '08, so I didn't know anything about it. I actually didn't really know anything about Ken and Diane, to be honest with you. I literally didn't know anything about them, but I knew something when I came in for my first interview, and I was sitting in one of the offices, and I saw a magazine with Ken Hendricks on Inc.
Yeah.
magazine, the cover,
Right.
and I'm like, and it was I don't know why I didn't do that, but I did not touch it. I did not open it. I didn't look at anything. And I in my head, I have a reason, but I just don't know why I didn't do it. And maybe I was being superstitious and thought, well, if I read this, I'm going to jinx myself. I'm not going to have any chance of getting this job probably. But when the Beloit Corp closed, it was just literally devastating to this community. And Ironworks, which was the very where I am, the very first part of this building was built in 1857 and then added on to we don't even know how many times this place has been added on to. I mean, literally the river was even closer to where I am back in those days than it is today. And it had such great bones to this. And when Diane's like Bill Beloit, I just said, this was the epicenter of this community. We need to bring it back to the epicenter of the community and have the focus from jobs, bringing in business. We knew, I mean, it's 1 million square feet. We knew we're not going to get another company to come in and just say, hey, we're going to take all 1 million. You know, it's just those days are long gone. Plus, we're 15 minutes away from the highway, so distributing product, 15 minutes doesn't sound long, but to those companies, that's a long ways nowadays. But um, so we just said, let's reinvent it and and I'll never forget it. I was with one of our asset managers at the time, and we had a tenant in here. It was a storage tenant, and they took 500,000 square feet of storage. And I had met him. And the asset manager took me down there to meet the manager of it, and then they toured me around, and I'm just looking at this place, and I'm like, this is a 500,000 square feet. And I said, you don't have a rack in here. Everything is on the floor, on pallets, everywhere. And I'm just like, you know, why don't you rack this stuff and you can shrink your square footage down? And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, if I can get this guy to shrink, actually, it gives us a better opportunity to do the adaptive reuse. And he said, well, we don't do that. We won't do that because we get paid by square foot of pallet on the floor. And I said, okay. And then I said, who's your main contract? He said, we only have one contract, and it's with Navistar, which Navistar is a government agency. And which you think about that for a second. As a taxpayer, I'm just like, wait a minute. This is actually waste of my moderate tax, that I'm giving to you guys. So that bothered me. And then something else happened. A forklift came over, and we were in a place what is now our Iron Tech, which is our co-working and incubator space. And he picked up a pallet and he was taking it over towards the dock doors. And I said, oh, are you distributing that? He goes, no. And I go, do you have to fix because there was an engine of some type, and do you have to fix or maintain that? And he goes, no. And I go, why are you moving it? He goes, because every 60 days we have to move every pallet. And I'm like, oh, God. And then I got to my final question for him. I said, how many employees do you have here? And he goes, 3, including me. And I said, so you have 3 employees in a 500,000 square feet? And he's like, yeah. And I said, what do you want to grow that to? He goes, to 2. And I'm like, okay. And then that was kind of the end of the conversation. And the asset manager and I were walking back, and he goes, I'll have the renewal ready for you, in a couple days. I said, don't bother. We're not signing any of it. They can move somewhere else. And he didn't care for that, by the way. He wasn't thrilled with me for that decision. But I said, we're never going to get anywhere with this. And I said that we got to move on. And I get it. It's it's $2 a square foot for the whole joint. So it's $1 million a year. So I mean, it's not chump change, but to do what we needed to do here at Ironworks, we had to do that. And that really set the pace for what you have here now. And ultimately it set the pace for what we do in Indianapolis.
So Ironworks, it's live, work, play, right? So you tell me a little bit more about the mix?
We are the one mix that we are in our next phases for is the apartment side
Okay.
of it. Beloit downtown is a pretty condensed downtown, so we have apartments that we've built now that are all surrounding, quite frankly, this building. And they do tremendous. I mean, it's just awesome to see. I think we're about 44 different companies that are here. Everything from your single startup person to smaller companies with 2 to 5, up to other companies that might have 300 plus. We have a YMCA that we ended up putting in here, which has been that was kind of our anchor downtown to really start to drive people back to the downtown. 'Cause people didn't come here. People that lived there, was really not a lot of reason to. And we put it in. It's one of the coolest looking Ys you'd ever see. It's really neat. But they bring in close to 100,000 visits a month. Yeah, so I mean, it's a big impact. I had a lot of reasons for wanting to push that and do that, but they have daycare, uh, which Beloit, like Indy, like all these cities in this country, we're in desperate need of good daycare. And we're up to right now about 1,600 total employees in here, so we got a ways to go to get to that 5,000. But that's the goal. It's the North Star goal. I get it, but we'll just kind of keep going at it. But I think in terms of types of businesses, lots of tech companies. Um, we have a number of manufacturing companies, smaller manufacturing, into lithium ion batteries for forklifts, that kind of stuff, to a manufacturer that does a lot of manufacturing for Amazon, in different products for them. And then we can go to, you know, investment companies, money managers, real estate, hospitality groups, of course, headquarters for Mid-States Concrete, which is a great local long company. They're here and they do tilt up walls and things of that nature. Really cool company. Yeah, so we're kind of pretty diverse
Mhm.
in the companies and the type. And then you have, a number of the companies are what I would just call more your service companies, the accountants and some lawyers and things of that nature.
All right, so there's so many things I want to cover. I'm gonna move fast here.
Yeah.
So where I live in Indianapolis, along Massachusetts Ave, which is always, as long as I've lived here, and I'm a transplant, I'm not originally from the Midwest, but as long as I've lived here, Mass Ave is a great restaurant and bar street. But at the end, it had this old, beautiful but unused Art Deco Coca-Cola bottling plant, and I don't know how big this thing is, but it's huge. And it was always
Yeah.
just there.
350.
Okay, it was always just
Yeah.
there. How did you get involved with this amazing historic redevelopment? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, we at that point we've done both buildings up at Ironworks at that point, and and when we got into those buildings up there, honestly, there used to be a Lazy Boy Furniture next door there. We were buying the site next door to that, which was kind of just a rundown quasi retail thing that was just really it was owned by the bank, and that's kind of how it came to us. And so we focused there first, and we were looking, and we were falling prey to the normalcy of real estate developers. We're like, okay, let's do a power center. We're gonna do this. It's gonna look like every power center. And I finally just went back to our guys and I said, you guys said this is such a great piece of dirt. I said, why are we building? We're building the same thing everywhere up and down 86th Street. There are a million of them. Why are we doing this? Why don't we do something with impact? And that's kind of where the Ironworks with Ruth Chris and all that was kind of born. And then eventually we did Ironworks Hotel right next door to it. But at that same time, then shortly after we finished all that, we got invited to. It wasn't necessarily an RFP per se. It was just a meeting of various different developers and stuff to come and meet at what is now Bottleworks in one of the well, we call it the library, but it's got a big star on the floor, and it was pretty rough and rugged back in those days, and we just started to hear about the product or the project and the potential of it, and and then I think we have a great relationship with the city, and the state as a whole has been really good to us, and they kind of started to say, hey, we really want you guys to get serious on this. So we said, okay. I said, we'll be serious, but I said, we don't get into bidding wars or anything like that. We kind of just say, okay, here's what we believe we can do based on what we want to do in the end. And we don't flip stuff. I mean, we do that in some of our product, but it's not the impact stuff like Bottleworks or even Ironworks is. And is you can't flip it anyways. I could say I could do it in 3 to 5 years, but they ain't making money. It's just too expensive to do it. You have to have a long term kind of a vision for this. And we got into it, and we won the bid. We were really happy with it, and then we're like, oh, okay, now we really got to do this. How are we going to do this? But I like you know, you got down to that end, and I would sit out that corner, and I'd look at, and I'm like, wow, this is just nothing. It just
Yeah.
stops. And then I started to really get excited about it, and then the team really got excited. They're like, look, we can change this. And you know, the hotel stuff came a lot because we had so much success on the north side with the Ironworks Hotel. We really thought, okay, that could be a great adaptive use. At the time, though, it was almost simultaneous. So as we were buying it, we were actually working with West Elm to possibly do a West Elm hotel. That was the initial thought process. And then West Elm, their CEO changed, and then they didn't want to make that a part of their growth strategy. So that was fine. And we were like, okay, well then we're going to do it, and we'll do it our the way we would want to do it. And we did. And um, it's you know, Ironworks here in Beloit I always say this is like my favorite project I've ever been a part of in my career. Bottleworks is right there. It's up there too because the history. I love history, and I love to bring those stories back because I think people, especially in this day and age, non-Instagrammable stuff, you just have to actually, you should know this, you know, because some of you, yeah, you know, here at Ironworks, and I've had it at Bottleworks, I've had people come to Ironworks in what is now Iron Tech again. They've stood in that room, and I had a lady cry, and she looked at me and she said, "I spent 40 years of my life in this exact room."
Oh, wow.
And she said, she goes, I was 16 when I started here and I retired here. I loved the corp, they called it. I loved the corp. Well, jump over to Bottleworks. We had the exact same thing repeatedly. We still do to this
Huh.
day. People will come to that hotel to go tour it, to go see where their grandfather worked, perhaps where they worked. You're getting older now to be into that. But and it was just, I think it's a special place. And the younger brothers, I mean, it was the largest coke bottling plant in the world
Yeah.
in Indianapolis. And what like when I started to really dig into the history of it, and it was a little bit hard to find a lot of the Younger brothers' descendants because a lot of them have just, you know, their names aren't Younger anymore. So, but we did find some, and you know, we have a piano in there in the one main rotunda area that was donated by a family member that just said, you know, one of the Younger brothers was a great grandfather, I believe. So they put that in there, and then a descendant of the other Younger brother sent us like boxes full of stuff from her grandfather younger and just the history stuff, which you'll see throughout the place. It'll be put in there. So the more and more we got into it, we like, man, this is just a great story, you know, and you know, we have to pay honor to it. We have to, you know, we never would have torn that down. If they would have said, hey, you know, why don't you just tear this down? We'll give you a bunch of money to build something else. We would have said, no, we're not going to do that. I wouldn't want to do that for that because I think it was too special. And I think it worked itself out. I mean, it's 350,000 square foot building that's from the far room on the third floor is 3.5 block walk to the front desk. You believe it?
Yeah. I
And
did.
I
Yeah.
timed it because I'm like, Jesus, we need to get cars to bring people down to the front desk because it's so far. Uh, but you know, it just has been just a fun project to be a part of. It really has been. And you know, then you get to Pins Mechanical or you get to the garage food hall. You know, those were the literally the garage is called because it was the garage where they fixed
Yeah.
cars, and then the school district used it for their bus repairs. And you know, and where Pins Mechanical is, that was just a bunch of storage for the most part. um and to bring it back to life has been a lot of fun. And you know, the terracotta and the terrazzo floors, you know,
Yeah.
this is one thing I said to some folks. I said, look, there's terrazzo floors in the plant. I said, the Younger brothers, they were doing that for a reason. And there was reason was their employee, they didn't want their employees that worked in the plant to feel like they were second fiddle to the ones that worked in the office. So they wanted to make things feel like it worked together. And that building's been added on to, I think, 4 times, and they stayed that whole pace. And to me, at the end of the day, it said, well, they had a heart because they certainly could have just poured in a bunch of concrete for a lot cheaper than terrazzo floor. I'll tell you that. Um, and I think it would have been a, yeah, I think it helped with the story and ultimately the brand that we wanted to create there.
So, did I read it? Am I right in saying that the Bottleworks, the hotel, won Best Boutique Hotel in the U.S. this year? Is
Yeah,
that right? That's
yeah,
so.
yep.
That's amazing. And we haven't even.
Yeah, it's got its second Michelin key
Oh my
now.
gosh.
And Ironworks got its second Michelin key, and then we have another hotel we own here in Beloit, the Hotel Goodwin, that got its second Michelin key as well.
So you're you said this at the top, but we haven't even gotten into it yet. Is you're also the head of Geronimo Hospitality Group. How
Yeah,
did that? Was that did that come later after Hendricks?
yeah, it did. It's interesting. And Diane, before she hired me, actually, I said, what did she say? There's things that, what are things you just don't want to be involved in? And I said, well, I grew up in the restaurant business. I was in the restaurant business of the last company I was at, and there was some rewarding to it, but there's a lot of brain damage with restaurants. It's a really, really, really hard business. So if we don't do that, I'll be pretty good. And then also no golf courses. Last time I was with, we did a course called Aaron Hills, which had a U.S. Open. It had to take at least 2 to 3 years off my life. It was just the most difficult thing I've ever been a part of. And she's like, "Well, I don't golf anyway, so I don't care." I wouldn't even ask that. And then the restaurant, she's like, "Well, I don't really care so much about that either, for the most part." Well, you flash forward to that. The restaurant that she hired me in was called the Beloit. God, I can't remember the name. Cafe Belwa, excuse me, which is French for Beloit, and it was kind of a French restaurant, which is really a bad idea to begin with because you're in the Midwest
Right.
and in Beloit, Wisconsin, you're kind of an hour away from any major city. You're not going to get a lot of people that jump up and down about French, but it was a bad restaurant, and Diane actually did own it. She owned it by almost default because she was really a believer that we needed at least a nice restaurant for the businesses in town because Beloit is a business town. It's got 5 multi-billion-dollar headquarter companies in city of 38,000. That's a pretty good gig. So she kept it, but it was just not doing good. And eventually, she's just like, I think you need to put this into your purview. And I'm like, okay, but can I do what's going to be needed? And she said, do what you got to do. And we gutted it, and it became Maryland Houston's steak joint. Maryland Houston's Ironworks steak joint. And the only reason that happened was because when I started here, I'd go to the Beloit Historical Society, and they just let me kind of wander and do whatever I wanted. And I saw a picture of like, I don't know, 15 guys all standing with tools, and one guy in the middle almost looked like Rumpelstiltskin. His beard was so long, but he looked like a murderer. He just looked. I'm like, God, that guy's gonna kill somebody. And it just caught my eye. Well, then I kept looking down, and on the very bottom of it, I saw Maryland Houston's Ironworks, and I'm like, damn, that's my office. And so then I kind of went down the Google rabbit hole and just started pulling up history and everything else. And I'm like, okay, I like that. And that's how we got into the hospitality side. And Maryland Houston's has been terrific for us. We've been really, really happy with it, and it really allowed us to start looking at doing other restaurants to fill gaps that we would have, obviously here in Beloit, but then in other places too. And so that's kind of how we jumped into that. The hotel side came right after Maryland Houston's was kind of born because the Beloit Inn was a community hotel. So people came and they threw money in to get the hotel built, which is another thing about Beloit that I think so awesome is that the people in the community, they get behind things in Beloit. They believe in Beloit. This is their city, and you'll know that really quick. I mean, they like it. But to invest in 2 or 3 guest rooms and then being a part of a rental pool, Beloit's not Orlando, Florida. I mean, you just don't. It was a great for them to do, but they certainly weren't getting much on the return side. So, and Diane and Ken were both big investors in that side. So we ended up buying everybody else out, and then we rebranded into the Ironworks Hotel, and that kind of was the start of the hotel and effectively the restaurants, and we kind of took it from there.
And now you,
The golf course came for whatever reason.
oh, so you did do a golf course.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah,
realize
that
that.
was one. That was one. Yeah, Diane's called a meeting and she, with like four guys from the Beloit Country Club, and I was like, okay, I wasn't really understanding what it was, but we were sitting there, and all of a sudden, I kind of like, oh boy, there it was like a lot of private clubs, they were struggling,
Hmm.
and these guys were really the ones almost funding it for the most part, and they were kind of probably to the point where they were just gonna, all right, we're just gonna say goodbye. uh, Diane felt strongly, even though she's not a golfer, she's like, well, you can't get rid of the club. She said, this is where all the businesses that are here, that's what they use for business and stuff like that. And I'm listening and I'm just like, and I remember I said to her, I said, you want to get a cup of coffee? We'll just go out. Right, we're getting a cup of coffee at a coffee thing. And I said, are we looking to maybe own this? And she said, well, it seems like maybe. And I go, remember you promised me no golf courses. And she goes, I do remember that. However, and then she told me about her feelings on the importance of it for the business and the community. And I'm like, all right, let's figure this out. And we kind of took it from there. And it's called the Beloit Club. It's gorgeous. It's it's not for the faint at heart, I'll tell you that. But it's we're very proud of it, and our GM up there is awesome, and so is the whole team.
That's awesome. So, Hendricks, as far as I can tell, I haven't found anybody who's said a bad word about. And I'm talking about city leaders, stakeholders, and I talk to developers a lot, and people
Mhm.
always have friction with the city, with community leaders. What's been your secret? I feel like you do it better than anybody. What's the secret?
Um, I think the team here, yeah, and I've learned this a long time ago through in my career through the wrong way of doing it, quite frankly. Uh, and development is hard. I don't care what it is. It's a hard business. It's extraordinarily rewarding business, and I love it. I really do. But to go in and look at it from an adversarial perspective, it's us, the developer, against the city, and how much can we get out of them, and all this other stuff. It just doesn't serve you well, and I also always tell our team, I said, everyone thinks that all that we create is like sometimes, our numbers and our data is, whatever, a cure for cancer. It's not. We're no different on that stuff than any other developer that, you know, the guys at Kite or, the Buckingham guys. I mean, the math is the math. And I said, be open and honest with any city, not just Indianapolis, with all of them, and just say, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is the challenge. And, and Bottleworks was tough without working with the state and the city. We wouldn't have been able to do it to where we are today. Not that we wouldn't have been able to do it, but you wouldn't see the new buildings. They probably would not be there at this point. We would have had to pace it out a little bit more, but it allowed us to really build it up and hopefully, bring in the tax base that the city needs and the constituents, everybody there needs. So I think the answer to your question is that, we go in always wanting to be collaborative and just and not take such hard lines on things. And uh, there's times where it doesn't work. It doesn't work for them, and it can't work for us, and that's okay. You don't have to walk away being a jerk either. You can just say, okay, look, this didn't work because you want to burn a bridge because you never know. You might find another project in a community that might in the same community. You might be like, okay, this is going to work, so why not do it? And I think the team here has just done a great job of staying to that. And yeah, we don't get emotional. I mean, trust me, I've been in meetings where I've watched other developers in our industry, and one guy I'll never forget this a long time ago, and he was just, I mean, he literally was scaring the council. He was so mad, and he never got what he wanted anyways. And I'm just like, and I did meet with him years later, and I just said, why did you go so nuts? I mean, I just, you should have just held back, tapped out for right now, and then come back again. Because I said, screaming at them isn't gonna do you any good. And so I just never really understood that philosophy. So, and And I'll be honest, I think Beloit's been terrific to us, great to work with. Indianapolis has been awesome, and the state's been awesome too. And even when you get down to Spree and stuff like that, I mean, we weren't looking for that, to be perfectly candid. And as we got further into it, and with certainly Brad Chambers, Governor Holcomb, David Rosenberg, and all those guys, and who I'd known for a long time, it kind of helped us see what we thought we could do. And Bottleworks is kind of the same thing, and um, and being collaborative and working with folks, and also we try our best not to be political. I want to stay out of that crap. I just want, if it's something that's a political thing, I always like to just say, let's just drill down to the facts of the issue, and not listen to what the bots are telling everybody on social media, and just, can we be additive to solving it and helping it, and I think Bottleworks, we looked at that right from the get-go. I mean, it was a rough little area over there for the most part, but it, we just said, well, again, we had a long-term vision for it. I don't want to. We wanted to be collaborative, and the city was great again, and we were able to get through a lot of this because of that. And um, I don't know. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I think we're good people, and we don't, you know, have ulterior motives or anything.
Yeah.
We kind of just say, okay, this is what it is. And it's something, with Diane, you learn very, very quickly. She is, she's compassionate. She's wicked smart. And if she does not understand, she will ask questions continuously. And and she wants to understand. And that's kind of, I think, how she instilled in me, but then we try to instill in all our team here is like, look, if you're working with the council, if you're working with the city staff and you're not understanding something, just keep asking questions. And you might get to an answer you don't like, but I'd rather get to an answer I don't like than sit in Neverland and be like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's gonna work, maybe it's not. But uh, that's not normal, though, by the way. We had stuff, and we bought in Chicago. There was is We could have been as nice as possible. There was the level of collaboration was virtually zero. And I said, you know what, let's just sell that and we'll move on. It's not worth it. And there's small cities as well that we've done stuff in, it's really difficult. And it's I don't know, look, life should be a little bit fun. You don't need to battle on everything.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why we don't go to Chicago's, we don't go to New York's, any of those places. We just like, you know what, you guys got plenty of developers there. You don't need us there anyways. And we like the focus into the Indianapolises and stuff because they're great cities. They really are, and we can have an impact there, which is always a goal of ours, and take it from there.
Yeah, you really can make an impact. I was thinking as you were talking, I think one of the reasons why people have why you have such a great reputation, at least in my city, is because you're taking something that you're making something new that people are excited about. Like you said, it's not
Yeah.
just like another power center, another, open air grocery center, whatever. It's like a new cool thing. Case in point, I need to get to this Circle Center Mall.
Yep.
So this has been it's right in the center of the city. It's downtown. It's an enclosed mall. It has been very struggling for decades now. And
Yep.
how did you who approached you to redevelop this mall?
Well, Brad Chambers, the state, and all them with everything we did at Bottleworks. And again, I've known Brad, well, honestly, since Ironworks up on the north side, and we have just a great relationship. Great guy, really great company too. And uh, they asked if we'd be interested, and I can remember at the time, I'm like, oh God, I don't know. Another thing, and but like you said, we're real estate people, so we're always like, okay, what's the old adage of real estate? Location, location, location. Well, it doesn't take you. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. Be like, okay, wait a minute, this is in the middle of everything. So we saw that, and we saw quite frankly, the blight and just the problems and things like that. And that wasn't a reason why we wanted to do it necessarily, but it certainly in the background had a reason to try and change it to make an impact to it. And the first thing I said to everybody, I said, look, if you guys are looking for us to just come in and take over this thing and then redo them all, release it up, we are not your guys. That's just not what we would do. Even if I wouldn't do it anyways, even if we were someone that wanted to do stuff like that, I just wouldn't do it because it's just too hard because the mall business by and large is so different and the downtown malls throughout this country are virtually gone, and yeah, and we do, well, as an example, we do a lot of stuff in Boise, Idaho, and which have been very similar, smaller city in Indianapolis, but very similar in the collaboration efforts. And yeah, they dug a giant hole. They started tearing down buildings to get their downtown mall. Well, they never got it off the ground. And
Hmm.
I talked to a group of them. I said, "Do you guys realize how lucky you are? You didn't get it off the ground because you'd have to be figuring out what the hell you're going to do with it right now." And and Indy and Circle Center, even though it's been struggling for a long time, is kind of one of the last remaining, whatever you want to call it, bastion of that type of thing in a major city in the downtown. And then once you kind of get away from all that and you really start thinking about the vision and what you can come up with in the bones, in the good part is, and we know this more now because that's basically what we've been studying for the past, literally the past year, is the bones of this thing. Can we build what we intend to build? And looking at I mean, I can't even tell you the thousands of plans of this place. By the way, none of them match anymore because as soon as someone would build out for Forever 21, well, they didn't go back to the original architect. So then all of a sudden you'd be like, where the hell is this room? This room's not on the plans. Yeah, and so then you went back, and so we ended up doing all our scans, and then we did the structurals and all that other stuff. So we just finished that with probably about a month ago. So we feel pretty good on where everything is at with it, in support of what would maybe the visions you've seen
Hmm.
for it. Um, Opening it up was imperative to us because yeah, I get it. Indianapolis is a colder city, but by and large, people want to be outside when they can be outside, even if it's cold. It's not a bad day to leave a big giant convention center and walk outside to go to a restaurant or something. I think that was really important to activate it in a real way. But then to bring in the real components, the mixed use, certainly there'll be office. Housing, we feel, is extremely important here. Um, and affordable housing is extremely important too. Yeah, and we struggled at even at Bottleworks. Our last phase, which is basically the parking lot of the garage food hall, that's where all of our housing is going to go. That's kind of was always the plan from the beginning, other than phase two, which is just been done. I think we had like 75 units in there at the time, which we actually flipped to office. And that's worked out well. But housing is extremely important to Circle Center's future because you want people to be able to live there. And you, I mean, how many thousands of workers do you have that work at all these restaurants and everything downtown? They can't live down there. I mean, we have to figure. That's not just us. That's the city and the state, and all of us coming together saying, "How are we gonna solve some of this?" No one just talking about it. Let's let's solve it. Let's put in workforce housing. Workforce housing was a wonderful product actually created in New York City because no police or fire, the nurses couldn't live in Manhattan. So it can work. So we do think that's really important. But then yeah, we always say, okay, well, what else? What else are we going to bring here? Yeah, and we're working with a number of different groups that are not in Indiana at all. We think could be really exciting. You never know. I mean, well enough, this stuff is looking great, and then also and it crashes, and you're like, okay, we're back to square one on that. But if we can pull a few of them, which I think one in particular would be extraordinarily exciting. Um, it's that domino effect of other retailers, restaurants, and things like that that are going to come there. Entertainment type stuff too is really
Yeah.
important. Yeah, certainly we'll be able to put in more restaurants. But even like Bottleworks, we've been really cautious on a lot of the retail on the first floor. We could have filled it all with restaurants
Hmm.
without a problem. There's only so many mouths to feed. And eventually you get to that level where all of a sudden everyone's like, hey, I'm only doing 2 million a year. I was doing 2.8. Well, I just sucked it all out, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I think that's going to be important though for Circle Center and whatever the 10 million guests that come into that downtown right in that area. We want them to be hanging out there while they're going to the Colts game or the Pacers or convention. We want them to go, no, we're going over there and we're going to hang out there because that's awesome. But what's more important, and when we were going through our branding strategies and studies on all this, which we'll launch by the end of the year, is our goal. Um, the thing I can't even tell you the amount of stakeholders we talked to in the city. I mean, it's hundreds. It was absolutely consistent. Not, I don't want to say 100% everyone, but God, it was high percentages. We want something for us, not just for people
Yeah.
that are coming here for a convention. We want something for us. And when we were starting to build our brand, that was like almost number one on our list now because we're like, okay, what is for the people of Indianapolis now? By the way, we already know we're going to get the 10 million from Visit Indy. I mean, it's one of the best convention bureaus in the entire country. I mean, Leonard, I mean, I'm full disclosure, I'm on their board, so I'm bragging them up. Uh, but Leonard Hoops runs a dynamic, tremendous organization, and they whoop up on some of the biggest cities. That one up to the north of them, by the way, they whoop up on them real good
Yeah.
on all the conventions. It's really spectacular. So we're already gonna get that, but if we can build it for the people of Indianapolis and the surrounding areas in the state, if you will, that they want to come there, I think that's just the best thing to go after.
Yeah. Absolutely. What's the so is it, am I right? It's going to be about a decade for that whole project to come to police
Yeah,
completion?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, Bottleworks were almost 8 years now on that one.
Wow.
Isn't that
And
amazing? From
in my
start to
mind,
where
it's
we
all
are.
new. Bottleworks is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny because you're right because you go through so much time for design and planning and approvals and and getting through all that process, and then all of a sudden you start building and everyone's like, "Well, it's new." Well, yeah, we started this 4 years prior to even swinging a hammer, and I don't think we'll be 4 years here, but we'll be in three.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's so cool.
Especially if you wanna do it right,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean I mean, I don't want us we can't do this at Circle Center. I want something that's everlasting, and even if we don't own it anymore years down the road, whoever owns it is gonna be like, "No, we're gonna take care of this one," 'cause, we're not buying this just because it's just a cycle of investment. We're buying this because we wanna keep this for a long term, and you have to build it good, and, I like history, so I like old buildings. I think people who destroy these grand old buildings, I just don't understand it. But the good part about them destroying those old buildings, like at Circle Center, which, as you probably know, there was some grand, gorgeous buildings there, and they're obviously no longer there. And I mean, Circle Center Mall is not a grand building; it's just a and so if we can do something right that has meaning and purpose, and people look at it and go, "Wow, that's pretty cool." I mean, I go to Bottleworks. I mean, I'm in Indy once a month minimum, maybe even more than that. Um, the amount of people out doing wedding pictures, graduation pictures, it's just
Yeah.
crazy, and it's awesome. We think, oh, this is just so cool. And every once in a while, this happened to me not that long ago. I think I was in Santa Barbara at a place we have there, and I was in some shop and they had this magazines. I was in a cigar shop actually, and I'm looking through the magazine, and all of a sudden I'm seeing these pictures, and I'm like, holy crap, that's Bottleworks. And it had nothing to do with us.
Right.
They didn't
It's
say
just a
anything about
photo
it, but I'm
shoot,
like,
right?
that's our stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, that's pretty awesome. So it's kind of like you, well, it's not quite as good as your story from South Africa, but it's similar on that side.
Well, Rob, we're out of time. I want to just
Sure.
thank you so much. I love adaptive reuse. I love historic buildings, and your Hendricks has done so much to just improve the quality of real estate in the Midwest. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me today. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun, and thanks a lot. And hopefully I'll see you down there.
Excellent. Well, if you liked this podcast, do me a little favor. Go into the app you are listening to or watching us right now and give us a rating. Even better, give us a little review. Just write one sentence about what you like about the show, or I don't know, what you hate about the show. Just give us a little review. I'm told it helps. You can subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app, Spotify, frankly, wherever you listen to podcasts, just go and search for Where We Buy. We're also on the web at wherewebuy.show. And if you've got a specific question about retail, shopping centers, or retail real estate, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for James Cook, JLL. And our theme music is Run in the Night by the Good Lords under Creative Commons license. That's a wrap.